Ben? 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 Ben!
Oh, right. Announcement time.
On November 7th, Ben, myself, as well as a few other close friends will be joining forces together, online through Discord. Not exactly a safe idea to be all gathered up now, is it? Anyway, Ben, you want to tell them this year's theme?
But of course, this year we are celebrating Pac-Man's 40th anniversary with Pac-Man Fever.
And that's it. We're just going to be playing the Buckner and Garcia song for 24 hours straight.
No, we're not. We will be spending the whole event playing a bunch of Pac-Man games. Yes, there's more than just a classic arcade lineup, believe it or not. You have games like Pac-Man World, Pac-Man Indigo Sea Adventures, Pac-Land, Pac-Attack.
2-pack?
No, John. No. As always, we'll be raising money for CHOP, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, helping children in need, and in this year especially, they really need it. This year's major incentive prize will be a Pac-Man 40th Anniversary arcade machine. Look at this thing!
That thing is a beaut. I want one for myself, damn it.
It's a minimum $50 donation. It will be limited to North American residents only. I know, kind of a change of how we usually do things, but to make up for it, we will also be giving away a Nintendo Switch. A minimum $25 donation, and everyone's eligible for that.
You can live in Pac-Land and we'll somehow get it to you. And as always, we're not alone for this adventure. You got myself, Ben, and my uncle and my family from SGB returning from some laughs, but we also got some guests, including, but not limited to, Chris Clark from the PJ Campbell Network, my co-hosts Nathan, Dan and Pat from Console Wars, The Pituation from WMMR, Tony Pearson, Dean DeFalco from Geek Aid, Kelly from Florida, the Mad Hatter from Radio Bucks, King K, and a bunch of others if they answer their voicemails. That's November 7th starting at noon EST and ending the next day at noon EST, and it's not in the middle of daylight savings time ending this year. Oh my god, this year is saved. And as before, it will be simulcast on YouTube and Twitch, covering both bases there. It's Pac-Man Fever for Extra Life's game day. Come on down and watch a yellow dude and his girlfriend gobble a whole bunch of balls.
Well, I guess it's happening. We're doing it. We're talking The Mandalorian. We decided we need to do a recap show like everyone else. And look at this fine group of people I've got. Maxwell's not feeling well, so he actually took the day off. But I'm happy to have Frank Janish and Sean Sullivan here. And we're talking Mandalorian today, gentlemen.
Yes, we are.
So much Star Wars. Do you?
Yeah,
Do you know about Star Wars?
I know not as much as I'd like to about Star Wars. Don't tell Frank, though, because he writes my stats.
I don't write them. I just record them.
I was also going to say, I mean, I guess that also explains your how you do, I guess, in the Schmodown, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I suppose so.
Yeah.
Love it, man. But real quick, guys, before we get into talking about the season premiere of The Mandalorian, and there's a lot to talk about, real quick, if you guys have not already, please check out Box 2. I'm very, very proud of everything that show has become so far. I think there's a lot to look forward to, but please check out Box 2. If you have not already, you should also check out our episode of Suddenly Soundtracks for Cabaret. It was a Patreon exclusive, or not a Patreon exclusive, but a Patreon request from Brandy Parker. Of course, Tuesday night during the election, we're going to be doing our safe space where we're going to hang out with you guys and just talk about the shit that's going on and, you know, kind of keeping an eye on the election and also drinking a lot.
Wow, you liberal tards.
I know.
Safe spaces.
I know. We're just snowflakes here, obviously. So, you know.
That's great.
We had a Halloween party playlist. Rachel Silvestrini, Danny, Tim Franco, Chris Clark, and Maxwell. Go check that out. And of course, tonight it's Halloween, and we are going to be doing a double feature of Trick or Treat and Halloween 2018 to talk about all the Scary Movie Squad stuff so far. It's so weird to think that we're ending Scary Movie Squad tonight. I can't hear you, Sean. You're muted, Sean.
Rookie mistake. Is this your first time? Is this your first day?
This is my first day. Aren't we doing a little bit of carryover?
Well, I wasn't gonna say anything, but
Okay. Well,
you
man.
Again,
they'll find out
First
tonight.
day. It's first day.
First day
I'll do
here. Oh man, I'm just so excited though, man. I am very, very happy about what we've got going on here. But first of all, Frank, I'm happy to have you back, man. It's been a little bit.
It's been a little bit. I've been a little busy, so I'm glad to be back. I did invade your one watch along like months ago for like 7 minutes, and then
Yeah.
I think that was the last time I was in these part of the woods over here. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you're still like an integral member of like this channel.
very kind of you to say because I don't do anything.
I know.
You're a moderator for the group chat, so I assume that means
I am right. Yes, totally. And I
must
take it
mean
very
something.
seriously. And but I'm fair but stern. So watch your mouths in there.
Yeah, exactly. But outside of everything else, how have you been? Like, you're surviving the pandemic. You're here. We're talking Star Wars, and Star Wars is good. We like talking about Star Wars, so it's a nice feeling, Like, good. Are you happy to be here right now?
Yeah, I'm very happy. Very happy. No, I'm just checking up on the chat. Sorry, I got a little distracted because I'm a moderator of the chat. So yep, everything looks good. Okay, back to you, PJ.
Oh, great. And Sean, I heard you were talking Star Wars before this.
yeah. There's a channel called the Gucciverse.
Never heard of it.
Apparently, it's named after some French purse designer. I'm not.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, we had a little den takeover over there. I think this will be a bit more professional and a bit more
That's very kind of you to say, because I'm never so sure.
laid back. Maybe. Can you be both professional and laid back?
I think so. And I think that it's so interesting because obviously Star Wars has been in a weird place since last December. And I think everyone's just silently kind of been waiting for Mandalorian to come back to be like, let's talk Star Wars and love it again. And hopefully, like, people will get along and we won't be yelling at each other on the internet. And so we finally got the season premiere, kind of almost exactly a year to the day of when we first laid eyes on the child for the first time. And we got a supersized episode, which ended up being Jon Favreau's directorial debut in the Star Wars universe. Of course, we know he's the creative force with Dave Filoni on the show, but he finally got to make his directorial debut with Chapter 9, The Marshal. And I'm going to start with Sean real quick. We're going to do like very basic talking about the episode a little bit with not a lot of spoiler first, and then we're going to jump into spoilers in about 10 to 15 minutes. So if you want to hop off because you haven't watched it yet, we'll give you a heads up of when the spoiler stuff is going to start. But start with you, Sean. What did you think of the episode?
Overall, it is my favorite episode of the show so far. It does everything I want Star Wars to do. It treats the canon with respect. It treats the existing material with respect, and it wasn't afraid to take some risks and show us new things at the same time. I don't have a lot to say that isn't spoilery, so
All right, that's fair.
That's where I'll go.
Frank, what were your initial thoughts as you jumped into this episode?
Yeah, I tweeted this out. It was some of the most fun I've ever had with Star Wars. Everything that they did in this episode just felt like the show had really not missed a beat. It felt very in line with the continuation of like the chapter headings,
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't seem like we were starting a whole new story. I mean, we kind of are, but it's just, again, a different chapter. Everything they pulled off in this episode, I thought, from visual effects to storytelling and everything in between, I thought was really great. And it just gets me further excited for the rest of the season and actually a little bit more towards other projects, Disney Plus projects they have for Star Wars coming down the line,
Right.
which who knows when that's going to be, but it gets me more excited even for those.
Totally. And I think it's really interesting because Christian Harloff, good friend of the show, obviously, and I saw him tweet earlier this morning that yesterday's episode is why he's so cool with Star Wars not being on the big screen for right now. And he's reminded that he thinks some of the best storytelling can happen on television. And I'm having a hard time disagreeing with that in a way, because we also had the Clone Wars that came back, obviously, for its final season earlier in the year as well. And I thought that its last 3 or 4 episodes alone were some of the best storytelling Star Wars had ever done on any platform. And I think Mandalorian continues to do that as well, because I think one of the things I like so much, and we'll really jump into this as we're talking about it, is the way that they really tie into the lore of everything that's been happening in this series as we know it, but also pushing it in new directions and different boundaries. So I think that Star Wars on television is kind of a really comfortable place for it to be. And it's almost like the natural extension of starting as a series, because in a way, being like episode 1 through 9, it almost asks to be binged, right? In the same way that you would look at binging a TV show. So it's kind of interesting that now we're in this place where we're doing it on a television as a series instead. And it's something Lucas had always talked about. Frank, what are your thoughts on it transitioning to television for right now? And like, do you like this as its home for a bit?
Yeah, I like that this is going to be the home for Star Wars for a little bit. I still wait for the day we get Star Wars back into theaters. I understand like Christian's tweet there in terms of maybe Star Wars is best suited for episodic storytelling in the TV medium, but I still think they can do it on the big screen. I mean, that's how this whole thing started off to begin with, was on the big screen, and it was told in a trilogy. So to say that they can't do that again in movies in a theater again, I think they can do it again. It just depends who they have running the ship over there and manning these stories and what plan they have to do that. I think that's the key part. So while Favreau and Filoni are wrapped up on the TV side of things, maybe they venture over into the big screen as a team, or one of them. I mean, Taika's got a movie, right? So
yeah, and Feige too.
And right. So when we love what Taika has done so far with the episodes that he's directed, and who's to say that Favreau doesn't do a big screen feature, or even further down the line, Filoni. So I'm hard pressed to think that Christian would have a problem with Filoni jumping into a big screen feature once Filoni's had more live action episodes under his belt, especially. So I think the day will come where we'll be like, look, Star Wars is doing it all, TV and the big screen. And I think,
Games,
I look forward to that day. Yeah.
Like, I think that there's definitely the media empire that is Star Wars, and I think it's really starting to find its footing. Television just seemed kind of like the natural progression for now, especially with Disney Plus. Like, they really seem to be jumping into interesting directions in universe building. Like, we're seeing it with Marvel, also with WandaVision on the way, Falcon and Winter Soldier, like so on and so forth. So there's a lot to look forward to in that. Sean, similarly, what are your thoughts on the current state of Star Wars, and are you happy with it on television, or are you excited to see it go back to the big screen, or are you happy with the balance of both?
Oh, is this where I get like all the Reylo fans upset at me?
Yes.
Okay, so I prefer my Star Wars stories to be smaller. Stuff like Squadrons, stuff like The Mandalorian, stuff like the Battlefront 2 story, where you're getting 3 or 4 people that work as a team, and they are on some sort of mission or some sort of goal it ties into the big, overall saga trilogies, but it's a lot smaller. We get a lot more of the day in the life type stuff. I would love to see I would have loved a series like Solo where you get a one crew on a freighter, running jobs, kind of like a Serenity or a Firefly situation. Not the one with Matthew McConaughey, but the one with Nathan Fillion.
The wrong Serenity.
The wrong Serenity. But I mean, yeah, ultimately, poor Taylor. Ultimately, I'm super disappointed by Rise of Skywalker. I mean, Rise of Skywalker, there's 2 things I love in Star Wars. Those really small stories where you're getting the people that aren't the Jedi, that aren't the Sith, and seeing how their lives run. And then the the big space battles. And Rise of Skywalker sets up for this big fucking space battle, and we don't get it. We get reused ships, and we get models that were from Rogue One that are just scaled up to work in this, medium. That's a whole other rant for another day. Maybe we'll have a discussion on that on Unwind one day.
Yeah.
But like, this episode of The Mandalorian really encapsulates that the interconnective tissue of, canon, whatever the fuck that means, with some of the best cinematography that I've gotten out of Star Wars in a long time. Ultimately, I'd love to have movies so we can get stuff like Rogue One, like Solo, The Force Awakens, and Last Jedi, I think are brilliant. I think Rise of Skywalker has some great shots. I think overall the movie is flawed, and I think it really speaks to the problems with what Lucasfilm is trying to do in film right now. Whereas when you let Favreau and Filoni take over, I think that's a better spot to be, at least until they figure out what to do with their film division.
I think that Filoni and Favreau, to your point, also play with the story group a lot more in a way that Abrams didn't. Abrams tended to seem to buck away from what the story group would have been doing, for better or worse. And I think that Filoni obviously has been with Lucasfilm a long time. Favreau has an affinity for Star Wars and always has. And I think that they like playing within the confines of what the story group has actually been doing. And I think you see it here with this.
I mean, it's to the point where Abrams changed Poe Dameron's backstory for fucking Rise of Skywalker. Like,
yeah,
Poe Dameron wasn't a smuggler. He was a hotshot pilot for the New Republic and then the Resistance. I mean, it shows a level of respect. This episode to me showed a level of respect for canon and legends that Rise didn't. Frank, you were going to say something.
Yeah,
important.
I think part of the reason why I think folks out there like the TV medium to deliver Star Wars is because if you're a huge fan of Star Wars, you know the world, you want to live in that world, and the best way to do it is these episodic, adventures contained in one story within a 45 minutes to an hour, and you get to live the day-to-day life type of thing within these episodes, whereas a movie is telling a much broader tapestry of themes and stories and machinations going on, right? So there's a reason why there's movies and then there's television. They are mediums to tell different types of stories in different types of ways, because you can't tell me that this Mandalorian episode could be a movie. The whole movie is that we kill, without getting too spoilery, a crate dragon, right? Yep. So like that's your big bad. Like, no, that would not work for a movie. You'd be like, that was it? That's 2 hours, that's it? For a 1 hour TV show, you're like, that was great. That was a lot of fun. And then let's see the next adventure, Mm-hmm. So I think there's a place. I think some people make it sound like Star Wars can't do movies ever again. It's got to be TVs because that's the only way they know how to pull it off.
I think there's a balance, obviously.
Yeah, there's got to be a balance.
Yeah.
And, I hope that they figure that out because, like I said, this all started off with the trilogy. So, and it was inspired from, obviously, serials and whatnot that George had in his mind and wanted to pay homage to.
Right.
So they can certainly do that. They got to get the right people in those positions to make that happen. And I think hopefully they can do that.
I think so. I
think that's ultimately the issue. They haven't had the right people in the right places, and there doesn't feel like there's any internal communication. And like I said, it's kind of a respect thing. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but the Zeiston class Star Destroyer that shows up on Exegol at the end of Rise of Skywalker, it's the same exact model that they used in Rogue One for the Imperial One Star Destroyer, and it's scaled up in a way that the windows don't work. Like, they just have giant fucking window. Like, you could have made a new model. You could have repurposed the model instead of just scaling it up and calling it a different thing.
Yeah. No,
for
totally.
For someone like myself that literally makes a point of digesting that, it takes me out.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you, and I totally see where you're coming from. And I think that one of the things that Lucasfilm has been figuring out along the way is how to keep the creatives happy while also doing what Feige does, where you also ask your creatives to play within the sandbox that you started, right? And I think that the television side, again, has figured it out much more cohesively and easier, and the film side is still figuring it out. But I think, to Frank's point, you see people like Taika coming on. You see the people like Feige, obviously, coming on. We know Ryan's been working on stuff too. Like, the idea of the people who play well within that sandbox can take it to the next level, given the right tools and the right leash, if you will, to do so. So I think with that, it will kind of jump into the episode itself. We're going to talk spoilers. If you haven't seen it, I'm glad to have you here, but we're going to spoil everything about it because this is Chapter 9. This is the season premiere, and there is a shit ton to talk about. And the first thing I just want to say as we jump into this, I never thought I needed a Clint Eastwood-esque space western that was also a Tremors episode in the Star Wars universe. Yet here we are. It was like tailor-made for me, but I really, really, really dug this episode. We start with the Mandalorian of Din looking for more of his kind because he's also trying to take the child back to its people, which is already such an interesting sort of focal drive since we know that nothing about Yoda's kind, and we got to get the child to his people. And we start on a planet with little evil, little Krite-looking creatures and John Leguizamo in alien makeup.
Yeah.
What a great way to start this episode, because it shows that just that really laser focused
Get better, Max.
ideas in Star Wars. My favorite part about this was all the aliens. Like, you had a weird Zabrak, you had a weird, like, almost Constable Zuvio looking guy.
Yeah.
You had all kinds of strange, the cantina scene all over again,
with a wrestling ring.
You know what this reminded me of, though? The beginning of the Bounty Hunter game, PS2 game.
Yes,
that's exactly what this reminded me of, and I'm like, this is really cool. I'm digging it. So that's the vibes I was getting from the beginning of this.
And again, yeah, and it's like a nod to Legends, kind of like what Sean was talking about earlier. And that's one of the things I like about the TV shows a lot is their love for the Legends lore too, and finding the best way to incorporate parts of Legends and kind of creating a new thing. Taking of the Source says, are we sure Taika's going to last, though? We've been excited about Star Wars directors just for them to drop out or be replaced during filming. I don't think Taika's going anywhere. I think that there was a very different regime and different things going on at the time. I mean, the Solo thing is a very different situation as far as the Game of Thrones stuff goes. Those dudes got a different deal at Netflix that became their thing that they were focused on. Yeah, like Taika's already filmed another movie. He's working on Thor and Star Wars. Unless something massively changes, I don't think he's
heavily integrated into the Disney family at this point.
Yeah.
So,
right. Yeah. So no.
But I mean, how deep do we want to go into
all of it? Just let's go. Let's dig.
So there was a line that John Leguizamo said. I don't know the character's name. Wait, hold on. Gore Glotka or something. I don't know. Yeah. There was a line that he said. He had mentioned, and this was mentioned a little bit in season 1, along with something that was mentioned by the Deveronian last season on the prison ship episode. If they're such great warriors, why are all the Mandalorians dead? Someone said. And then the John Leguizamo said in this episode, the price of Beskar just keeps becoming more and more valuable. Is Mandalore destroyed? Like, did they actually blow up the planet? Because all the Mandalorians are scattered to the winds. Beskar has become this hot commodity. The only place you can find Beskar is Mandalore.
I don't know that we know what happened once, the Empire finally took hold of everything. At least I don't know. I don't know if that's out there somewhere, whether it's I'm sure there's some sort of Legends book out there, but in canon, in the new canon, I don't know if there's anything outside of what we got through Clone Wars and like the Ahsoka book, or anything
and
else.
Rebels.
Rebels, right. So I think Sabine does mention something about it in Rebels. I don't know off the top of my head specifically what.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, because we see Mandalore at the end at the beginning of season 4 in Rebels, and the Mandalorians retake Mandalore. But between then and the start of this show, the Great Purge happened. So maybe Mandalore is inhospitable, maybe not destroyed.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to speculate because we don't know. There's no real mention of Mandalore beyond.
You mean how much of a gripe would the Empire have towards Mandalorians? It to erase it from existence that Din couldn't find it on a star map and go there and look around.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting thing about how they haven't been able to go there or would want to go there or even mention how to get to Mandalore. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Or even refer to it as a planet. I mean,
yeah.
I don't even think it's been referred to as a planet yet in the series.
No, so we're definitely set on this path, right, where this guy is going to try to double cross Din and steal his armor for profit, essentially. And as we know, you don't fuck with Din, you don't fuck with the Mandalorians, and he just totally goes to town on this dude and gets the information he needs, which is there's a Mandalorian that was seen on Tatooine. And so he is a little surprised by that. Obviously, we know he's been to Tatooine before. So he has to go back to Tatooine now to try to find out who this Mandalorian is who is hanging out, apparently, on the planet. And
I've got another real deep dive note before we swap to Tatooine.
No, go for it.
The guy whose name I don't remember anymore, Gore Glotka or whatever it was. Gore Koresh. I have it written down. Never mind. Gore Koresh mentions he swears by the Gatra, which is a very subtle comics reference to the droid Gatra that shows up in the Darth Vader comics. Now, the droid Gatra is, unless there's another Gatra of some form, the droid Gatra is a crime syndicate of ex-battle droids and assassin droids.
Okay.
So it doesn't make any goddamn sense why he says that line, because unless he works for the Gatra.
And maybe he does.
Maybe he does. I would love to see them show up because that's a really good tie-in with season 1 where, Din goes from hating droids to this episode. We see the development of, let them work on my ship. That's fine.
Yeah.
I think that would be, if we move past the Moff Gideon villain at any point, that would be a good secondary villain to have.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Frank.
No. I was gonna get to your point because I have something else before we move on after.
Well, mine's about Tatooine, so if it has to do with.
Oh no. Okay, so before we leave, yeah. Did we ever say exactly where he was at?
No, I've looked.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Anyway, so when they're in that arena, they've been doing this thing with the child and violence. They always key on the child looking at all the violence that he is witnessing and taking in, and so much so that even last season that try to choke out Cara Dune, right?
Right.
And I feel like they're setting up this thing for Din to come to terms with or realization that he's surrounding this child with a lot of violence, and he finds this child very innocent, and it's similar to him, when he was a foundling, right? Right. Even the armorer says, this child is a foundling. So I think the child, is going to start, while it's learning, I think it's also become, a little too violent for the Mandalorian's sake, for Din's sake, because he's going to recognize, it's because he is continually seeing me fight and do all these bad things. I'm having a negative influence on the child. And I think it's through this that Din will have a change of heart, a change of mind, a change of, philosophy, and start questioning in some ways the honor of Mandalorians. You know, what does that the code really entail? And for him, and I think when Din finally takes off his helmet, I think the first person who's going to see him or thing is going to be the child. Mm-hmm. And I think we're leading to, at least into season 3, where we will actually see more of Pedro Pascal's actual face, and it's through his, like, this whole code and honor thing is going to be challenged because of the way he's leading his life and how he uses, you know, his skills for personal benefit and all of that. But it's all changing because of the child, and I think he's gonna be like, look, I still have my code and my honor, even if I take off my helmet. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's to relate more towards the child. And so I think there's gonna be a huge character transformation that's gonna be, I mean, it's already started with the child, obviously, but I think it's gonna take it to another level where fundamentally, I think Din's gonna have a lot of conflict, and it should be, I think it'll be interesting between him finding other Mandalorians or the armorer and coming to terms with what it means to be a Mandalorian in that time.
So it's interesting because your theory ties into something that Sean and I have a theory about too that we'll talk about as we get into this, cool. Which I love because you are on a very similar wavelength with us on where this is headed. And one of the things that was very interesting to me about this episode too, similarly about deciding to tell your story the way you're going to tell it, I thought it was very interesting that Favreau and Filoni threw down and went straight back to Tatooine in this episode, when last season the Tatooine episode was notoriously like the most disliked, I will say. I'm not going to say it. I think it was easily the weakest episode of the series, and a lot of people didn't like Amy Sedaris in the episode. And what did they do? First thing, Amy Sedaris is back.
I'll tell you what. I liked her performance more in this episode.
I said the same thing. Yeah.
Because, and this is not to be mean or to take a dig, but you're also working with a much better director so far in Jon Favreau than you are with Filoni, because Favreau's worked with actors a lot more and he's got more experience. Again, Filoni is still learning, and that's not a bad thing. And I appreciate that he is, and I'm glad he's cutting his teeth on this of all things. But I love that we go back to Tatooine and we find out that there's this outpost, essentially, this town that's not even on a map. It's, most people don't know it exists, and you just kind of have to go and find it. Like, there's Mos Espa, there's Mos Eisley, and then there's this town out in the middle of fucking nowhere in the desert, on the already desert planet. And this is your straight Clint Eastwood style, the man with no name heading into the small town, to a town that is being terrified by a beastie, if you will, not necessarily a graboid, but a crate dragon. And he is coming to this town and they need help. And he finds out that we have a sheriff here, the Marshal, played by Timothy Olyphantastic, Mr. Timothy Olyphant, and he is wearing Boba Fett's armor. Starting with Frank, what were your thoughts on this situation?
So when he first walked in, I was like, very skinny. That is not Boba Fett. Is he wearing Boba Fett armor? And the other thing that I noticed, or that I heard, was the spurs. And I go, and I immediately go, this is the guy that stumbled upon Fennec Shand. And everyone, it makes sense because everyone thought, oh, maybe his dad Boba Fett. Well, then here he is wearing Boba Fett armor, but he's not Boba Fett. But they give us this sound effect clue, if you will, of the spurs when he walks in. I'm like, that's got to be the guy, right? And so that's where my mind went already. And so I was like, okay, he's probably not a good dude. But let's see. And then we find out exactly who he is, a little bit after that.
Yeah. Totally. And, I thought the reveal was just so good. I like the way that Timothy Olyphant looks with it's like a half Mando armor and half
very Halloween costume-ish.
Yeah. It's Disney bounding.
Yeah, exactly.
It's straight Disney bounding as a Mandalorian. And I'm all about it. It was a cool look, and Oliphant is just awesome in the reveal. Sean, what were your thoughts on this?
So Frank, you didn't read the Aftermath trilogy, correct?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So
I love that this was tied into exactly what we were talking about.
So
I mean, I have done my research afterwards, obviously, but yeah, go ahead.
I let out a little bit of a squeal when I saw the a very unbecoming squeal for myself when I saw the title card, because as soon as I saw the title card, I knew, okay, we're getting Cobb Vanth. I had said, whether or not I said it publicly, I had said I would rather see Cobb Vanth than Boba Fett in this series.
Mhm.
It's a little bit more of an interesting story. You know, Boba Fett, although he's my favorite original trilogy character just based on visuals alone, probably not based on actual character, but he's boring, right? He doesn't have anything going for him in the original trilogy, at least. In Clone Wars and in Attack of the Clones, he's got a little more going for him. But in the original trilogy, he doesn't have much going on.
He just looks cool.
Yeah, he just looks cool.
Badass. But like having Cobb Vanth come into this this universe in a big way is exactly what I was talking about earlier when I was saying they're respecting the canon. The fact that another thing we skipped that I'm going to bring up real quick, R5.
Oh yeah.
The fact that we got another focus on R5. Favreau has mentioned this before, but they focused on the back of his head where the motivator blew. Yeah. Like that just shows so much respect, and it ties back to a certain point of view where you know, R5 is saying he just wants to be cared for. He just wants an owner, you know. So it's really nice that we're kind of getting that tied in, and that Amy Sedaris is the one to take him in. But so Cobb Vanth and the armor and the Halloween costume. So one thing that I tried at some point as a hobby was building my own Mandalorian armor. Hence why I've got this nice helmet right here. So the measurements. There is one key element that makes it look like the armor doesn't fit. The armor is actually sized perfectly for him. But he's missing... Boba Fett has a girth belt and then ammo pouches around his belly.
Right.
Because the belly plate ends about here.
Yeah.
On Boba Fett too. But yeah, I love that we get to see the yes, Mike K. The first book is rough. The rest of it is fantastic.
Agreed.
The way that he's just wearing his red, you know, tunic and cargo pants with the flight vest over it and a knee pad strapped on, like that is perfectly how I pictured Cobb Vanth. And Timothy Oliphant really just captures a certain swagger that character needed. Yeah, it was perfect. It was great. Another thing, though, real quick, since we're talking about the Western and the Clint Eastwood, when they show the Mandalorian first coming in through town, they show that the buildings are all on stilts.
Mm-hmm.
And which later we find out that's because of the Crate Dragon. But it also gives that real nice boardwalk appearance.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was just something that I was like, oh, that's a nice little way of handling that.
Well, in the way when he's coming in on the speeder bike and the way the camera sits, it's just like when the horse is coming into town. Exactly. Like it was so cool. Like Favreau definitely did his research, and he was like, I want to do this as a straight Western. And Mandalorian has obviously leaned towards like the samurai films and the Westerns to this point, but this was so overtly a Western. Like so overtly
strolling into the saloon, looking for so-and-so, walks in the door, you know, and it's all of that, man.
Like talking to the bartender, finding out the information about the town, and you know, so it really was leaning on. And I've been doing like a deep dive on Eastwood lately, so like it just made me happy because I'm a big Western fan, so it made me just kind of squeal with giddiness in the same way that even hearing Cobb Vanth, because again, I've read the Aftermath books as well. And, you know, they really set up him even getting the armor originally and like how that all plays out. And so I kind of like that we saw that. And I really like also that we dive into his story and we see a little bit of what Aftermath does at the very beginning, their very first part of Aftermath, when the Empire falls, it picks up on Coruscant as the statue falls, and you're realizing, like, in the movie, we see the celebration. We don't see the impact of what's happening on the ground a lot of the time. And the idea of what's left of the remnants of the Empire or outside parties fighting for control. And I thought we saw that in a really interesting way here of right as the Death Star was destroyed and people started to celebrate, well, now there's no law and order, and we go for it.
I've got an actually to throw at Jon Favreau.
Uh-oh.
So, they emphasize in this episode, real quick, just because I'm going to forget it if I don't mention it. The holo of the Death Star blowing up that is shown has been used several times in other mediums, which is a real nice touch that they're using that same holo of that's what's circulating through the galaxy. First shows up in Star Wars Uprising, the mobile game, which sucked. Anyways.
Yes, it was terrible.
Okay, so they focus a lot on the Empire being destroyed, being what creates the power vacuum on Tatooine. That's wrong. It's a factor, but the main factor is that Jabba is dead.
Yeah.
I just found that interesting. I guess it's a little more digestible for a more widespread audience.
I mean, I don't know if that's really an actually, because like you kind of even
it's
say
a factor.
there, it's a factor. But I think once the Empire is done, then it's like, all right, all bets are truly off, because even when Jabba was alive, the Empire was still there and had their hands in it and was still, was even working with Jabba, right? So it's like, yeah, it's a factor, but I don't know. I would go as far as to say, actually, but
that's fair.
Time.
Sean's over here going, I want Favreau's job.
I want his head.
Like, that was something that Chris Clark brought up last night, was like, I thought Jabba controlled Tatooine. Well, he does, but yeah, I mean, he controls Tatooine because the Empire just lets him, and the Empire did have occupation on Tatooine. But yeah, it just felt like there was a missing puzzle piece there. That's my one complaint for the episode.
Sure, I can see where you're coming from, but I think I think we're going to see more of that overall in the mediums, where we see more of some of these planets were Empire occupied, but still kind of run by the people. Similarly, Cloud City, right? Lando's still technically running stuff while the Empire occupies Cloud City. I think there's a balance, and so the fall of Jabba also meant that in that time, depending on exactly when that holocron was seen and when that flashback is, because if it is right after, Jabba hasn't been dead very long. So the Imperials probably never reoccupied the area, right, to retake control. So now everyone's taking control.
Yeah. And
that was kind of the point. So this whole thing basically sets up the idea that Cobb Vanth the town is overrun by a mining company for control. Yeah. And he goes into the desert to get away, and he's going to come back to save the town, but he doesn't really know what to do. The Jawas find him, and they kind of resuscitate him, and they get him healthy again. And what he took something from him. What was it? Do you remember?
The Camtono.
It
Yes,
was the Camtono of
Siliscrax crystals.
Thank you.
And
the Jawas. Yeah, so the Jawas want the crystals, and they are literally trying to give him anything that they have in the Sandcrawler.
Yeah.
And he sees the armor, and he takes the armor, and he goes back to the town, and
it's Iron Man all over again.
It's Iron Man all over again, essentially, yeah. And he saves the town, runs these dudes out, and now is the Mandalorian Marshal, if you will.
Yeah. Even the missile shot, is like Iron Man blowing up the tank. It's like,
dude, it was like identical.
It was.
The only difference was he didn't turn around and walk away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it was identical.
Yeah, he's probably like, what? Actually, don't turn around. I've done this. Just stay looking straight ahead. We'll make it
I didn't even. Someone else mentioned it, and until you said it, Frank, I didn't even put together that it's the same fucking director.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Favreau knows what he's doing. He's playing to his audience, and he knows his strengths. But I thought this was a great way to do this.
Yeah, no, it was great. Before we launch all into that, I wanted to get your guys' opinions on this. Is Cobb Vanth the guy that stumbled upon Fennec Shand? Do you think that was the mystery person? 'Cause
Personally,
I
no.
do think it is.
I think it doesn't matter. So I think she's dead. So I think that was more of a like, hey, we want you to talk about this. We've got something coming next season, and then they deliver up on it first episode of this season, right? Because everyone talked about, oh, that's the sound of Boba Fett's boots. And then the first episode we get, I mean, I'm sorry if you wanted a surprise, Boba Fett's in this. First episode we get both Boba Fett and Cobb Vanth. If she's dead, I don't think it matters. If she ends up being alive, then fuck me.
I see. I have a theory on that as well, because
Okay.
so sort of jumping all the way to the end here. Like at the end of this episode, Din and Cobb Vanth, they have formed a relationship that's friendly, right? And I think Din finds that's Cobb Vanth's an ally of his now, right? I think they will obviously cross paths again, to Melisfont, sure, right? The thing is, I think what's going to be a kind of a point of contention is that Cobb Vanth has sort of rehabilitated Fennec Shand, and Cobb Vanth and Fennec Shand have this cordial or friendly relationship. Mandalorian Din has one with Cobb Vanth, but Din sees Fennec Shand as his enemy. So now Cobb Vanth is in between both of these people, and I feel like maybe Cobb Vanth, for the sake of his town, would side with Fennec Shand. He finds her as an ally to keep the town safe or whatever, even though she probably has her own ulterior motives. I think it would be a very dynamic that if Fennec Shand pops up in the town and Din's like, what? Like, I thought we were cool, and here you are with this other bounty hunter. It's like, what's what?
I killed that bitch.
Yeah. I was like, I think something like that could potentially happen if, in fact, he is the person that found Fennec Shand. Because it's like Ming-Na, I think, should really be more in this series.
Yeah, I mean that's the only reason why I don't want her to be dead, because I want Ming-Na Wen to be in the show. Like, she's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But and Tachyon Tachyon brings up a good point. Like, that's far. That's why I kind of think it doesn't matter. Like, because it's not like it was more of a tease, and maybe they didn't have everything fully fleshed out. They didn't know how they were going to do it.
I could see. What is he doing all the way out there? Maybe he's looking for help to kill the Krayt Dragon. He's looking for someone to help. You can come up with plenty of things. He had to go get supplies. I mean, so to say that, what's he doing all the way out there? Yeah, but eventually he stays there all the time in Mos Pelgo. Maybe not. Probably not.
Well, the other thing too is in episode 4, and I mean Star Wars episode 4. Luke mentions, like, I can take you as far as Anchorhead, but I'm not taking you all the way to Mos Eisley. Yeah. That's far.
Yeah.
But eventually, you have to go into Mos Eisley. I mean, you need supplies, you need so I'm not saying it's not possible, just my gut right now is telling me it really doesn't matter.
Hell yeah, Kylie. A freaking dragon. That's how you debut a season.
The dragon was great. I have written in my notes, fucking Krayt Dragon is written in my notes.
So I mean, I just want to say, now that we're kind of talking about all this, but with the Krayt Dragon itself, can I just say how much it's very fucking clear that Jon Favreau is a Tremors fan, because the moment that the Krayt Dragon arrives is straight out of the first time you really see the Graboid in action in Tremors, like that same feel of the zoom ins on the faces, the way that you see the ground rumbling underneath and it leading to destruction. I was flipping the fuck out. Chris Skalicki texted me and he goes, the moment that happened, I thought of you, and I was like, you were the happiest you have ever been because they are doing Tremors in Star Wars. And I was like, you are not wrong.
Yeah, we got so much in this episode.
We really did.
We really fleshed out the Tuscan Raiders, which was shocking.
Which was awesome, by the way.
I still have so many questions.
It was so cool to actually see the Tuscan Raiders, by the way, as like characters, not just things that stand around and look cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to say that the Tuscan Raiders are fully absolved in my mind, because they still did kidnap and torture a woman.
Yes.
But you know, they whatever's going on with their culture, the fact that the gaffy stick is a multi-tool, they like the shot of them cleaning the bantha's teeth, like what is the little smoke gourd? Like, I've got so many questions about Tuscan Raiders that are probably never going to be answered. Why do they have metal studs in their head? What's up with their eyes? Why do they have the little leather? Like, I don't fucking get it.
When did the Mando become a dog whisperer?
Right. When did the Mando learn to speak? By the way, PJ, write this down. Those are called Tuscan Mastiffs.
Thank you, Tuscan Mastiffs.
Slow down question.
Fantastic.
Did you show up in what movie?
Attack the Clones?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I was like, why have I seen these before? And then it only dawned on me until we got to the shot of the huts and stuff, and I was like, and it put it in place for me. I was like, oh yeah, Attack of the Clones.
Yeah. They need a better name than Tuscan Mastiff, though.
And
I don't know. Isn't Mastiff a dog though? It's like that's a dog, right? So it's like it works for me.
And so, of course, to Sully's point, Tuscan Raiders are not to be trusted, especially in this town of Mospego, because the Raiders have raided them before and killed their people and stolen from them. So there's definitely bad blood between these two camps, and the Mando has to be the bringer of peace in this situation. And what did you guys think about how this played out?
It's so cowboys and Indians. I mean, it's really cowboys and Indians. It's, you know, and again,
Frank, please, cowboys and indigenous peoples.
Yeah, that's what I said. So, yeah, I thought all that was great, and it's also somewhat of a, not to get too political.
Give me just a second, guys.
But it's also, not to get too political. It's sort of a timely message that you're gonna have to work with people, even though you have your differences, find a common ground and come together for the greater good. You know, so I mean, there is that little subtle message within that whole dynamic that's going between the townspeople and the Tuscan Raiders, and then you have, Din Djarin being somewhat of the moderator, right? So between the two parties. So I thought that was handled really well and executed really well.
Yeah, and I really, going back to the minor detail of the gourd, like when Din has to explain, you take their water, you take their land, and when they offer it to you as a gift,
yeah, you don't want it. Yeah,
you don't want it, and that's what pissed them off. There's so much little. One thing I was disappointed in was we didn't see any female Tuscans.
I thought we actually did.
Maybe in the background.
No. I felt like, was it the first time I think we go to the Crate's cave, the one that entices it first? She doesn't die, or is that the one that doesn't? There's one of those times I felt like it was more of like a female frame underneath.
Well, because the female Tuscans have completely different garb. Without PJ here, I don't think I can share, but yeah, I like that was just, it just felt like they kind of ignored part of the culture, and especially on an episode where they're really displaying that culture, I kind of expected. Which, you know what, maybe this isn't canon, but I thought we saw these in Attack of the Clones. Maybe this is Legends. But no, this is canon. But anyways, yeah, let me pull up my notes. What was next? God, this is why we need PJ. The whole idea of the, like, when they try to lure it out with the bantha to feed it.
Yeah.
Tachyon, I'll let when PJ comes back, he can do a screen share and I can show you the screen grab of it from the movie. But the reason the worm ate the Tuscan and not the bantha was that it didn't travel in single file.
Oh, yeah.
Because you had the bantha here and it was standing next to it and ran from there instead of going behind the bantha. And it pulls back to that episode 4 line.
You can certainly say that, but I also equated it to, the Jurassic Park T-Rex sequence. Its
very
vision,
much so.
Was, or on the movement, not so much the standing, the goat not do anything. It wants to hunt, not be fed, that kind of thing. And if it's going to see 2 running, Tuscan Raiders. Well, that looks, I should be going after that instead of the standing still bantha. So,
right.
Yeah, that's where my mind went. Yeah.
But also, it should have also gone after the bantha. And ultimately, I think that's supposed to be, I think it's almost implied that that's the same bantha that has the explosive strapped to it at the end.
Oh, okay. Probably.
I don't know why I think that, but it just kind of felt right to me. How did you feel about there were a lot of allusions to like the abandoned Sarlacc pit. Jumping ahead, you see the Mandalorian get his armor covered in acid and all that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that was seeding the fact that, Boba survived. Here's how.
So there's 2 things of that while I don't know how you can equate the innards of a crate to that of a sarlacc. Different biology, sure, probably right. But you would say, well, the crate is at least probably way more acidic than a sarlacc pit. I'm guessing, sure, based on what we saw in this episode. I do think it also
and the line slowly digested over 1,000 years.
Right. So I think part of it is the there's the Tuscan. That is weird.
Yeah, the female Tuscans have a completely different garb. And again, this brings up more questions. Why do Tuscans and Jawas just have the black void?
Because it was simple design. I don't know.
I don't get it.
It's cheaper that way. I don't know. But so getting back to the the whole crate dragon and Sarlacc pit thing, I think the line that I've never seen an empty or what was the cave or whatever. It's like, because you would eat the Sarlacc. So then you go, okay, well, clearly the Sarlacc that swallowed Boba, well, they killed that one. Not necessarily these Jawas or whatever, but like a Sarlacc can be killed in that manner, and then there's a void, there's a cave now. So that's how the Jawas must have stumbled upon the armor of Boba Fett. That makes sense, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Boba lived or survived, because you don't know how long it took. He could have suffocated in there, right? You don't know.
Yeah.
Or the rest of his body that was exposed could have been digested. So there's a whole slew of other things that could have happened, but
especially because Boba wears a lot less armor than Din.
Right. But it does explain the fact that we could get the armor back because it could have been salvaged from the dead carcass of a Sarlacc, which can be killed. So I think that's what the main explanation, I think, is what they were going for there.
PJ, how you doing?
Good. I got a chair.
What?
Nice chair.
What? Is that your new chair? Did you already get your new chair?
Yeah.
You ordered it last night.
Yeah, I did a store pickup, and I had someone that was able to bring it for me.
Wow.
So, that's a nice feeling. I got a new chair, waiting for my desk to get here on Monday.
Is that what you were doing right now? Did you just go get your new chair right now?
I did.
PJ, I made a point about how much more professional this show was going to be.
And we are. We're still professional. I'm even more professional than I was before. Good
Good point.
So, to Frank's point, it's very interesting that you bring up the idea of it just being the armor, or not of Fett surviving. And so I'm curious because I also really feel like, as far as this stuff goes, I feel like there's the Boba in the room, if you will. There's a lot of people who still think that The Mandalorian is a show strictly about Boba Fett, and they haven't figured out that Mandalorians are a creed and a people. They're not just Boba Fett, right? Because not everyone is us, and they don't watch all the things the same way that we do. So I kind of think that we do. Why are you shaking your head at me?
I'm still disappointed in you, PJ.
Oh, stop it. Just stop. Don't be disappointed in me. My back is killing me, dude. Less than it was. But I think that in a way, like, I think they have to kind of address the Boba Fett thing. And to me, I feel like the end of this is clearly setting up. And I mean, obviously that's the point, right? We're all supposed to see that it's Boba Fett. We've heard in the press that it's supposed to be Boba Fett. All the same, I could also see them diverting the other direction and being like, the armor survived, he did not. But it just, I kind of want to see Boba Fett being Obi-Wan. He ended up in the Sarlacc. He got out of the Sarlacc, and in the same way that Obi-Wan did at the end of Revenge of the Sith, he hung out on Tatooine and kind of dealt with his angst and griefs and learned and became a different person. And that's kind of what I want to see Boba to be. Because I think, again, to what we've talked about, Boba's never been a great character as far as the movies have been concerned. The shows did heavy lifting to try to make him more interesting in the end. But I'd love to see a very different version of him who's seen some shit in the time since Jedi ended, living on Tatooine, living in the desert, and be kind of almost doing to what we're seeing Din do. He changes and he becomes different. And I think that that's the thing that, to your point earlier with Baby Yoda or the child, and the idea that he's affecting Din to change. And I also think the people around him are going to make him change. And I think that was the point of being around Cobb Vanth, because Vanth right at the beginning says, maybe I pegged you wrong. And he's seen that the Mandalorian is changing. And so if we see someone else who was of Mandalorian creed who also changed, it could be another push to, we can be better than we were.
Well, and so that's the whole, maybe we're jumping ahead a little bit, which is fine. But
we probably were. I just heard all the stuff about
Frank.
Sarlacc.
To what we were saying, what we were talking about earlier, where, you know, there's a little bit of a,
correct.
You know, PJ and I have a little bit of a prediction as far as a running theme for this season. And we'll start with Cobb Vanth. Like, actually, let's jump back last season. Last season, we see, you know, number one, Mandalorian culture has really shifted from what we know it in Rebels and Clone Wars. It's a very different culture. Has a lot of the same roots, but ultimately what their creed is and how they treat it is different. Number two, at the end of season one, they say, you know, your sigil is the Mudhorn. You're now a clan of two. And Din is very much still learning what it means to be fully a Mandalorian and follow the Mandalorian creed. And he's still a strict adherent to don't take off your helmet and, you know, this is the way and all that. Well, maybe there isn't one way. And I think that's what this season is going to be.
Yeah.
You know, if we do end up getting Sabine's outlook on Mandalorian culture is incredibly different. Or Bo-Katan, her outlook at least was incredibly different. So when you meet Cobb Vanth, in my opinion, Cobb Vanth is everything a Mandalorian should be, right? They're proud, they are a great fighter, and they fight for a cause. Din doesn't really fight for a cause, right? Din is protecting the child, but only because it was mandated to him by the armorer. He says, I mean, to an extent.
Yeah.
He
He's
was
mandated to find its home. He was already protecting the child. He did that all on his own. Remember when he blew up,
Right.
you know,
but
the
he was
safe
very
house.
conflicted about it. He wasn't entirely. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of conviction in that to me yet.
Yeah, I see it different. I do see it different.
Yeah, and I could be wrong on that. I just feel like if you look at every other Mandalorian we've seen have a spotlight role in other mediums. They've had a driving purpose of why they fight. I feel like Din doesn't have a reason why he fights. He has something he's doing, but his sole purpose is, like at the start of the show, his sole purpose is, I fight because I am a Mandalorian. Whereas if you look at Sabine, she fights because, she believes in freedom. If you look at Fenn Rau is fighting to protect his people. Bo-Katan is fighting to, shake off the bonds of Death Watch and the Empire and Darth Maul at various stages. And even Pre Vizsla is fighting to restore what he thinks is the rightful way of his people.
Well, I think Din was fighting to maintain the culture and to keep alive the culture of the Mandalorians, and they had to do it in secret because they were purged, right? And so I think him doing the bounties and all of that was for the survival of the Mandalorian way, which he had been indoctrinated into as a foundling. So I think that was the reason that he was fighting. And then here comes the child, and he sees himself in the child, and he takes it upon himself to go rescue the child, to take it out of the grips of the Empire. Because one, he hates the Empire, and two, I think he sees himself again in the child, and so I think there's all of that's going on for him.
I agree with that to an extent, which it doesn't change the overall. What I'm getting to is, I think this season we're going to see various examples of people who either are Mandalorian or Mandalorian adjacent, like Cobb Vanth, like Boba Fett, probably Sabine, maybe Bo-Katan. And I think that we're going to see different outlooks on what it means to be a Mandalorian. And I think that will form an opinion in Din's mind. And possibly, like you had brought up earlier, you think by season 3 he's going to be taking off his helmet more. We're going to see more of Pedro. I agree with that. I think that's what's going to happen, and I think that's how they're going to get there. Is they're going to, I think Boba Fett is going to play as a foil. I think he's going to show everything wrong with being a Mandalorian. PJ, I don't think he'll be developed. I think he might develop eventually, but I think he's going to still be the cruel, bounty hunter.
I'm curious what Boba Fett knows of being a Mandalorian, because he was never brought up to be a Mandalorian, right? So I'm curious, how he views Mandalorians, or what's his state of mind if in fact
it is
if in fact it is him. Yeah.
And I think that would be part of the point too, really, is just this idea that at the end of all of this, he's a very different person than Din is. And I think that's going to arguably be the point. Just whatever, if it is him, he's going to have a massive influence one way or another on Din, on where he pushes forward. And I'm curious to see it play out.
All right. So real quick before we get to, because we're starting to allude to Frank's theory.
Yeah.
So real quick before we get there, Boba Fett as a Mandalorian or not. So I don't think that right now we have an answer. I don't personally have a strong opinion on it, but I have an argument for him being a Mandalorian. And that is this. It's possible that Jango was a Mandalorian. In Attack of the Clones, he says something like, "E Boba u dead soy," which is, Boba shut the door. It is not Huttese. And it is possibly Mandoa, which is the language.
Right.
In actuality, it's Tamura Morrison speaking Maori.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of makes it this unidentified language. In old canon, it was Mandoa, but in canon, we don't have a hard and fast rule. It's possible that, and this is true of. So first, I'll go back to Legends for a minute. In Legends, Jango was absolutely a Mandalorian. He was part of a group called the True Mandalorians, and they fought against Death Watch. The timeline is shifted back a little bit, so this would be pre-Episode 1. He then goes to work for Darth Tyrannus, and then, the events of Attack of the Clones. So that's kind of the status quo in Legends. Jango Fett was a Mandalorian who was against Death Watch. In the Clone Wars movie, we have a line from Almec that says, "He's no Mandalorian." Well, that's kind of an argument in that part of the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Who's a Mandalorian? The true Mandalorians, the pacifist Mandalorians, Death Watch? Who is a Mandalorian? What does it mean to be a Mandalorian? Again, back to that whole idea. It's possible that Jango was a Mandalorian and therefore raised Boba to think like a Mandalorian, but the people in power and in question at that stage of the Clone Wars didn't see him that way. Now, of course, George has said, well, they're Boba and Jango, they're not Mandalorians, they just have the armor. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Well, but look, George, that doesn't rhyme.
I don't know if he added that last part.
He did. I was there. Yeah.
I was there. Okay.
Yeah, that's what he told me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I mean, so I think that that's still kind of up in the air. I don't have a strong, hard and fast opinion on that. But regardless, whether or not he's actually a Mandalorian, that's what I mean by like the Mandalorian adjacents, right? He's someone who at least is under the guise of being a Mandalorian. But Frank, to your point, tell us about Boba Fett.
Yeah. So first off, I think Jango is a disavowed Mandalorian. I think that's just kind of way I've always seen him, especially when he like offers up the DNA of a Mandalorian to be mass produced. I think probably the proper Mandalorians are like, "What?
You doing what now?"
No, we don't do that, dude. So I think, in my own head canon, at least, that would be like the impetus for like disavowing him. As far as my theory of Tamir Morrison in that last shot, I think there's a decent. I lean the way of that is not Boba Fett, in much the same way that people were thinking, that last shot with Fennec Shan line that we thought the Spurs, the sound of the Spurs, that was Boba Fett. It's never explicitly stated in the episode that that's Boba Fett. Just like it was never explicitly stated that was never Boba Fett over Fennec Shand, right? So my theory is that if we're to believe these rumors of Ahsoka Tano to show up, I think that who we saw was another clone trooper that had once served under Ahsoka. And my theory is that when Ahsoka does show up and this new clone trooper has come into contact with Mandalorian and maybe he's traveling with him or what have you, I think when Ahsoka shows up and Din is not too sure to believe what Ahsoka is telling him, that this clone trooper that maybe Din has now already met, who is Tamir Morrison, can verify that that's Ahsoka Tano. I fought with her during the Clone Wars. She knows the ways of the Jedi. She can help you find, where this child belongs. You should trust her. Because I think Din is still going to have some hesitation towards befriending a Jedi or someone who was once a Jedi, because those cultures were once, at war, and he still seems to have that view, as he said sometimes, a couple of times already throughout the series. So right. I think that could be the reason. I also did do a little math checking. I think the math still checks out that could still be a clone. I'm not saying it's Rex, because as we know, Mandalorian takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi. We also know that Rex...
It might be less.
It might be, right. So around 5. Probably no more than 6, okay?
Yeah, I would say no later than 6, probably.
Yeah.
So there's this is going to lend more credit to your point, too. They've never given a definite timeline on it. Mm-hmm. They've said probably about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
This will give credit to it being Boba Fett or it being a clone. It could be less, because number one, why would Boba Fett be sitting around for 5 years?
Right.
Number two, a clone would probably look older, or so I thought.
Yeah, see, the thing is, we know that Rex, and along with Hera, was at Return of at the Battle of Endor, right? And that was only no more than 5 years prior. So to think that Rex, right, like, well, see, also that's actually not canon. I just looked that up today.
It's not, but it's
but
canon. But I don't think the age is that far off. So I think that
sure.
I was gonna say like, oh well, Tamura Morrison should have been aged up then if he's supposed to be a clone. But kind of looking at it, no, I guess not. Not really.
He looks pretty effed up. I mean,
Yeah.
like he's been through some things. Like
there's a
he's been through
scar
Clone
on his
Wars.
face and shit. Like,
Yeah.
there was
Like,
definitely something.
I mean, and it could certainly definitely be Boba for sure. But I think it'd be more interesting
if
to
they
me.
curveballed us.
It would be more interesting to me if it wasn't, and it was another clone trooper that served under Ahsoka once upon a time, still giving us that little bit of a Rebels tie-in or Clone Wars tie-in. I think it would be a little bit more interesting, and maybe they do bring Boba in eventually,
Right.
But because it also doesn't because the other thing is, I think this clone trooper is the Empire's fallen; they're on their own. And perhaps this clone is trying to look for like, what am I actually? What do I do now? What's my meaning? What's my purpose?
Sure.
And he's like, well, I know that I'm from a bloodline of a Mandalorian, Jango. Oh, Boba Fett was this son of his, unaltered. Maybe if I find him, I'm on Tatooine. Then he comes across Cobb Vanth, who has the armor. You're like, okay, you're not Boba Fett. Like, all right, so maybe he is dead, but still keeping tabs on Cobb Vanth, and now he hears an actual Mandalorian has come across to Cobb Vanth, and so now he pops up because it would just be too coincidental for Boba Fett all of a sudden to pop up in the same place the Mandalorian happens to pop up, and it's like, well, but the other thing is, he could, after what happened to him in Return of the Jedi, he could be totally just like, whatever, I'm not that person anymore, and something else could have happened.
Let me ask you this: if you were to give an over/under, what's your over/under?
I think at the possibility that it's Boba Fett, I think I would probably say 60%.
Okay,
it's Boba. If only because I don't really want it to be Boba, but I feel like they might go that way.
Well, and it's kind of my point, right? Brian says, so Frank, are you saying he's
yes, a new clone? Yeah. I'm
thinking
it could served under Ahsoka.
It could be an existing clone, but it's not Rex.
Right. I'm not saying I don't think it's Rex. Yeah. No. It could be somebody else. I don't even think it's anybody that we've actually followed in Clone Wars or that popped up in Rebels, right? I don't think I think it's just somebody else that was in that garrison, whatever, that or at least once upon a time was under her command or knew of her, like during the Clone Wars.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think like to the point of all of that, I could definitely see them going that way, but also to Frank's point, he just said, I could see them doing Boba. I don't necessarily want them to do it, but I feel like what I said earlier is really why
he even said 60% Boba.
Right. And the point being is you got to deal with the Boba in the room because, again, regardless of whether we like it or not, there's a lot of people who just see the Mandalorian and they assume that it's Boba Fett.
All right, so let me ask this, PJ.
Yeah, and then, like, real quick, again, I go back to the example of Fennec Shand, that creature.
Right.
We all thought it was, that's got to be Boba, right?
Right.
But if I believe it's Cobb Vanth, then I think possibly then they're doing the same thing with this last shot of the episode. That's how I'm getting my
totally.
reason.
I like where your head's at. I think it's actually not a bad take.
I want to let's ask this, PJ. This is your show.
It's our show. I don't know
this is your channel.
All right, fine.
You write the show notes here. How much do we want to speculate? How much do we want to just discuss? Because I'm going to ask you the question, and then I'm just going to keep talking.
Well, we're already an hour and 20 minutes into this thing, so I think we've been both speculating and discussing both sides.
Okay, sweet. So Boba Fett. Why? Let's say hypothetically. Let's just suspend our disbelief and my chair used to lock when I tried to lean back, and it doesn't do that anymore.
You gotta pull the lever out.
I did.
No, it didn't work. No.
Nope. Nope.
I can do that now.
So anyways, let's say hypothetically that this is Boba Fett, which I think it is. I think it's, Occam's razor, most likely Boba. Maybe he was one of the clones that attacked her at the end of season 7 and survived the
I don't
crash.
know, but he would still have the inhibitor chip in him, if anything. And if he saw Ahsoka, he would be compelled to kill her. So like
maybe not, because you had that's a,
because like if he's able to identify that's Ahsoka, his inhibitor chip would kick in.
good trigger.
It should kick in.
Unless
It might not.
Unless they degrade, they are organic.
That's
or,
true.
Or bioorganic, whatever.
Right. It could be.
I think it's Boba. I think just Occam's razor. It's most likely Boba.
Yeah.
It,
I think so too.
The way it's framed. So the question is, why has Boba Fett done nothing for 5 years? Well, we don't know. Number one, we don't know that he hasn't done anything. Number two, although for the purposes of TV, pacing, Din ends up finding that village pretty quickly. But as like when R5 pulls up the map, like that's
not on the map.
It's not.
But
on
you're
the map.
also talking about Boba Fett, the bounty hunter that was hired by Darth Vader. In the comics now, found Obi-Wan's hut, had that actual battle with Luke in there, or skirmish we're gonna talk about, and like got that information for Darth Vader, right? Like, so you mean to tell me Boba Fett couldn't track down a group of Jawas that somehow got his armor and tracked it down within at least a year? Come on, then you're not Boba Fett at all. Like,
so that's kind of my big question here is like, if it is Boba Fett, and again, I'm about 80-20 that it's Boba Fett. Either A, the timeline's wrong, or B, which we don't know how long it took him to get out of the Sarlacc pit.
Right.
Well, I think the same amount of time it took to get at least the armor.
Yeah.
From the Jawas at least, to get that armor. And we don't know that the Jawas didn't get it themselves, that armor. They could have raided or, scavenged off to somebody else who once had it. So we don't know that they were the ones that first get it out of the Sarlacc.
So Brandy's taking Frank's. I'm putting my money in on not Boba Fett.
You know what? Hey, you know what? It's time for an ad read. PJ, you know what else Brandy's putting her money on?
Our Patreon?
Travel Network Patreon. Join today.
Yeah, look at that. We've got tiers and everything. You could tell us to watch movies. You can tell us to talk about soundtracks. You can join us on our Discord and yell at Tim Franco, who's in there. There's a lot of perks.
You know who's not in our Discord?
Who?
Frank.
That's true.
I was just thinking about that. I'm in an old one, I think, because I was just looking at my Discord. I was just looking at my Discord the other day, and I'm like,
Frank,
I'm in this one. The what?
Do you like Discord?
I don't dislike it.
Okay.
I think I need to add Frank on Discord first before I can add him, because I don't think
we'll figure that out off air.
Yeah. No,
look what you started.
This is the Discord show, and
welcome to
where we add people to Discord.
Yeah, I do think it depends on how long Boba was in the pit as well.
Because you also got to think, like, once that barge blew up, right, in Return of the Jedi.
I've never seen any of the shows.
Once that barge blows up, right, at Return of the Jedi, I'm sure the Jawas are there, like, the next hour or two scavenging.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So
they're fast. It's kind. Did you guys see? You guys saw Pacific Rim? It's kind of similar to that. Every time one of those monsters, the kaijus go down, there's people there real quick that are picking up the remains and using it for shit. Like the Jawas are the same way. Even the Tuscan Raiders, as we saw at the end of the episode.
But it's like, who's up for killing a Sarlacc? Like,
right? No, totally. Look at Mike. Patreon, Streamlabs, TeePublic. So many.
There's a few other things to hit on. We kind of skipped the Crate Dragon battle, but I mean,
a Crate Dragon battle happens. It was cool.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I do like the throwback or like the homage to Boba Fett jetpack.
Yeah.
That was great. I love that a lot.
I don't know how I feel about this. If it's Boba Fett, I say you should do next week's show without shirts and in towels.
That would be a Gucci-verse show, and I don't think we're going to do that there either.
No.
Yeah.
Rachel Silvestrini and Saul both said they will not take off their shirts on camera. And I respect their decisions. I will stand in solidarity with them. There you go. Brandy is so helpful.
Yeah. Let's get through the rest of this real quick.
All right. One other thing of note for the battle, like it was a great battle. We had I've seen a lot of people talking about the line "Take care of the child." I don't even want to talk about that line. That's a whole thing. The crate dragon pearl. What a great Easter egg!
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Our personal friend Kevin enjoyed that a lot. I had a nice discussion. He
texted me right as
he texted everybody, PJ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
look, I did it 6 years earlier.
It made me laugh, man.
Sent me the picture.
Yeah, he sent me the picture too, and I was like, Kevin, I love you.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he got so much enjoyment out of it.
Yeah. Anyways,
it was a great episode, man. And
how many blaster bolts out of 10 would you rate it?
Out of blaster bolts, do these blaster bolts rock, or are they a box of blaster bolts that don't work?
Is it a blaster bolt or is it a stun?
Yeah,
a stun or is it a blaster bolt?
That's a blaster bolt. This episode was great. This is exactly what I was hoping for out the gate coming back. We'd get an episode that was like very strongly tied to what we know this universe to be. I think The Mandalorian is proving that we're filling in gaps of things in the right ways, in the same way that Clone Wars did. Like Clone Wars only enhanced the prequels. I think Mandalorian tends to find a way to enhance the universe overall in small ways. And this episode continues to do just that for me. I am super excited about the rest of the season. I know that we're going to be seeing all sorts of stuff coming in, and it'll be fun to just kind of see it all play out. You know, like there's a lot to digest, a lot to delve into. We obviously hear the rumors about Rebels being continued in some form in this and getting like a Rebels sequel. I want to know about Ezra. I want to know about Thrawn.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what's going to happen with that. Like, I clearly want to see Ahsoka Tano. I think we're getting all of it. So it's just a matter of the next 7 episodes, how this is all going to play out and how it's going to go. And I am hyped as hell. I thought this was just so fantastic across the board. And more Timothy Olyphant-tastic, please.
Yes.
Yep.
I just want to say also, this Crate Dragon battle reminded me so much of a raid party in Star Wars Galaxies. I was like,
sure, yeah,
exactly what it is. Everyone, I was like,
100%,
so awesome. Yeah.
You've 100%. got that thing in all the MMORPGs where you just have a bunch of people kind of idling in one spot, like waiting for the action. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it only comes out every 12 hours, so we're gonna sit, all gather here and get the pearl as our milestone or whatever. Yeah.
Frank, how many Womp Rats out of 10 would you rate this episode?
Okay, well, see, I don't like Womp Rats, so the less I give, the more I like it.
Better. Okay.
So I would give it out of 10, 10 being the worst, I would give it a 2. 2 Womp Rats.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's
I would give it 9 hunks of Beskar out of 10. Maybe 9.5. I think this was my favorite. Like I said, this is my favorite episode. Brian, did we talk about the possibility of Cobb Vanth going Mudhorn Clan?
Dude,
we
don't even have Mandalorian armor anymore. How's he going Mudhorn Clan?
Well, that's ultimately part of what my initial theory was with him learning what it means to be a Mandalorian. I think part of that will be him growing his clan, and whether or not, say what you will about the actress who plays Cara Dune or, Carl Weathers' character, they're kind of part of his clan as much as Queel was kind of part of his clan.
Yep.
I think that's the point. It's the idea of found family and people you can rely on. And I think that he's going to slowly grow that over time. Whether or not they're going to be in every episode of the show, that is a possibility. And Brian, I definitely think that's possible. Because I think Cobb Vanth, like I was saying earlier, really does show one angle of what it means to be a Mandalorian.
Oh, Jake's in the chat right now, said he's watching the episode right now. He was sidetracked with stuff when he watched it last night. And I'm glad you're rewatching. I've actually watched it twice so far. I'm going to watch it again probably, 3 times. I was going to watch it this morning, but I got up super, super late. So
I wonder why.
Get a chance to. Yeah, no idea. But I love it. And it real quick, before, because I kind of said some of the stuff I'd like to see. Is there anything you guys are hoping to see in this season? Before we head out of here, what's some stuff you're hoping to see in the season moving forward? I'll start with you, Sean.
I got it. Assuming that's Boba Fett, I got it.
Oh, well, there we go. What about you?
I'm satisfied.
I think like that I want. It's not things that I want per se and like specifically. I think I just want them to continue to deliver the stories and the execution the way they have been doing. I think that's the only thing I could really want. Whatever story they want to tell me, I'm on board as long as they keep doing it in the ways that they've already been doing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, yeah. I'm super excited about everything we're getting this season. I think that Mandalorian is doing some really cool stuff, and I cannot wait to see what we get next. But with that, I think we'll get out of here. And I wanted to just say real quick, we've kind of all talked about it off camera. It was very sad today to hear about the passing of the great Sean Connery. I'll bring it up again tonight in the watch along as well. But this was a place where we wanted to celebrate Star Wars. There's not a lot to want to talk about that situation. But Sean Connery meant a lot to me. I did a little tweet thread about why it's so important to me. Anyone who's watched this network long enough has heard my story about The Rock, and like it was the first R-rated movie I ever saw in theaters, enough that it's like had a very massive impact on me. So it was very heartbreaking to wake up to that news, but he also got to go out in Hollywood. In the last movie he ever made, he punched the director in the face and then never looked back. So
that's awesome.
I mean, if you're Sean Connery, it was Stephen Norton, the dude. It was League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. They got in a physical altercation. He punched the director, and that was the last movie he ever made. And so, imagine being Sean Connery. You got to go out by punching a director in the face, and you never had to look back at Hollywood. He spent the last 17 years enjoying his retirement, going to watch tennis matches, and he died peacefully in his sleep in the Bahamas. Like, it's got to be good to be Sean Connery, guys. And I am sad that he's gone, but it was a hell of a thing to watch his career. Any thoughts from you guys?
No, I mean, I think just such a legendary actor and all his works, and obviously James Bond, right? You know, immediately there, and Indiana Jones. So yeah, I'm glad for like the guy was able to live, until 90. It was one of these. That's a long time. And he has a lot of great work out there. Yeah. So he is gone but not forgotten for sure.
Yeah, and if you've never seen any of his stuff or like dived into his filmography, there's just so much to uncover. Like outside of the James Bonds and the Indiana Joneses and the Rocks of all of it, like he did some incredible work. Worked with incredible filmmaker Sidley Lumet. He worked with quite a few times. He worked with Alfred Hitchcock. Like all the way up through the early 2000s, he was making movies. You guys, like, dude was one of the best in the business, and we remember for that. Sean, any thoughts before we get out of here?
Not really.
Cool. Well,
I rarely wax poetically about dead people that I've never met.
That's fair. Real quick.
That sounds really callous. It's sad that he died. He lived to 90. He's got a wonderful filmography, but I don't know the guy.
That's fair. Well, I do know Mike K, who donated $5 to the Streamlabs. He said, I agree with PJ. This was the Star Wars Tremors crossover I never even knew I wanted. And I think that is summing up just how much we all liked this first episode of The Mandalorian. And I got to spend the last hour and a half talking Star Wars with two of my favorite people. This was so much fun. And I'm excited to do this every week. Every week we will be here at 12 p.m. PST 3 p.m. EDT, and we're going to be talking Mandalorian with you guys, and I am happy to have you guys here. Frank, thank you for being here, my friend.
I'm glad I can make it.
Me too, man, and I hope you're able to make the other ones, because talking Star Wars with you is always one of my favorite things. Like, I remember, like, after Rise of Skywalker came out, Frank and I were on the phone for, like, 2.5 hours talking Rise.
Yeah.
So it was
a lot of condolences going on.
There was a lot to break down and a lot of.
Like Rise of Skywalker? What?
I didn't say that.
I didn't say that either. I
just said I needed to talk about it. It's just
You did a lot of condolences.
Or consoling.
Brandon says still live, huh? Well, we're getting out of here. And that's exactly why. Yeah, we talked about the 56-minute episode for the last hour and a half, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Frank, where can the kids find you online?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at FrankieJ29, and I do the Showdown Rundown every Saturday, except this Saturday and last Saturday. But going forward, Saturdays, 10 a.m. on the Showdown Entertainment Network.
Love it, and you're crushing it as always, my friend.
Thank you.
And Sully, where can the good kids find you?
You can find me on Suit Up Sully on Twitter or Sean Sully on Twitch. I will be here a lot, and on Wednesday, I'm going to go and plug this real quick. On Wednesday Chris Clark. Wednesday we are doing a suddenly soundtracks of the best. Nope, that's not it.
I know. I'm trying to find it. I don't know why it pulled that up of all things. That was weird.
We are doing the top 10 retro game soundtracks. That is to go to at the beginning of the show. You guys had the clip for the Extra Life Pac-Man event. We are also going to be doing one here in conjunction with all those lovely streamers. If you're unfamiliar with Extra Life, it is a month-long charity all of November for various children's hospitals. Usually done on Twitch. We're going to do it here on Twitter. Nope, YouTube. This is YouTube. But yeah, come hang out. We're going to talk video games. It's actually going to be barely any PJCN crew, just me and Chris Clark, and I'm just kind of there to help run the ship. So
yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, though. I can't wait. And, of course, you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram over at PJ_Campbell. You'll find us here back again tonight, our final of the Scary Movie Squad watch-alongs. We're doing the double feature of Trick or Treat and Halloween. That'll be at 5 p.m. PDT. So 3.5 hours from now, I'll be back on here with some of your favorite people as we talk Trick or Treat and Halloween 2018, bringing our Scary Movie Squad to a close. Once again, please check out BoxBox 2. There's more BoxBox goodness coming your guys' way. I cannot wait. Tuesday night, again, we're going to be doing our PJN safe space, if you will, because we know that you guys are as stressed out about the election as we are, and we want to spend time playing games, hanging out, and we'll give you like updates on what's going on and what have you. And of course, Monday night, we already announced it. It's like one of the only things that we fully announced is we are doing Batman Returns. It'll be our first in the Merry Movie Squad watch-alongs, and I look forward to all the things we have going on with that. But thank you guys so much for being here. It was so much fun. I love talking Star Wars. I love talking about it specifically with these two really great people, and I look forward to talking about it more in the coming weeks as we get more Mandalorian. Until next time, guys, we'll see you.